yesterday? Good. We learned a lot about you yesterday morning when I asked you a few questions, but we learned a lot about you yesterday when you went to the sessions. And one of the things we learned about you yesterday is you guys are pretty good at what you do. I've heard from all the faculty who are doing these sessions that you guys are really pretty on top of stuff, asking really good questions, following along. It's a good sign when you go to some of these things and you're a little bit bored. So that means like next year we got to up our game a bit. So next year if you come, this is going to be a lot harder. And there may be a test at the end of the day. So, so that's great. For me yesterday, the high point of the day was to see people hanging out in B54 playing tracks. Who was out in B54 playing tracks last night? That. I didn't get a chance to do a lot of that, hang a lot. I'm probably going to do more of that a little bit tonight. But that was totally great, just to see you guys playing stuff. The stuff that you were playing I thought was really pretty cool. And the stuff that I thought was most impressive was this kind of instant community that you guys all put together. And that's really the most important thing. Caesar, you can turn me up, man. Just crank it. That's really the most important thing for coming here, for coming to things like this, is to build community. You know, share each other's emails, keep in touch with each other. That's totally great. And you know, as you leave here, as you go out in the world, establish careers, establish your pathways, those are the things that are going to sustain you through your life as an artist and in a career. So today we're going to talk about performance, and I think one of the questions that all of us have asked for many, many, many years is, how the heck do you perform with a computer? So this is something that, you know, when computers first came out that you could buy and bring into your house, they were like these big boxes and chunky things. And, you know, a few people would take these out on the road and do some stuff with computers. Then laptops came out, and I was like, oh man, I can take this laptop to my gig. And then so people like were, you know, bringing laptops to their gigs and sitting there and doing stuff. And then everybody in the audience after a while, they says, okay, is that person, are they like really playing something, or are they doing email? And so we've always been kind of, even those of us who've been deeply involved with manipulating sound in a computer in front of audiences, and not checking our email, have been really thinking about what's the idea of being performative. How do you perform this, and how do you connect with an audience? And I think in inviting DiViNCi to join us this weekend, I think the thing that really kind of grabbed me by the throat about his performance practice is it was all about performing. It was all about connecting with an audience. And that's one of the things that as electronic musicians that we have to really do. And that's really the place that you connect from being a producer to being a performer, is kind of figuring that piece of it out. Lots of stuff involved there, because all of you, as you perform, you're going to be making your own instrument. It's not like you're picking up a guitar and I got a Marshall and I got a Stratocaster and this is what it does. You kind of have to design your own thing. So I am today super looking forward to today's session so we can all learn some stuff. So please welcome back DiViNCi.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Ooh. Yeah, check, check, check. Good? How's everyone doing? Good. Awesome. What's that? Well. Very well. Or I'm doing very well. I don't mean to put the very on you. I'm doing very well. I'm glad you're doing well. But how was yesterday?
It was awesome.
Yeah? Awesome? It was well? It was well. That's fantastic. Well is fantastic. Look it up in the thesaurus. Well, fantastic. So I kind of broke form yesterday, and in the studio actually did a performance. But that's what I'll be doing today, is discussing performance. Something that is my favorite part of being a musician, and not something that I actually planned to do. Like I said before, you know, I kind of inadvertently blazed my own trail in the career that I have and in the art that I have and developed because no one was doing this stuff when I started. You know, this wasn't a thing where you'd be like, oh yeah, that, I'm gonna get one of these and one of those and one of those and I'm gonna do that. Now it's a thing, which is awesome because I don't feel alone anymore. For so many years when I started, I felt like, okay, all right, I guess I'm doing this. And people didn't really understand what I was doing. You know, when I was performing and just going crazy up there and everything, I'd go on forums and people would be like, DiVinci's stupid. Like, why does he go up there and just hit a play button on a CD player and start dancing around? Because they thought what my drum machines were, they thought I was playing CDs. Because people hadn't seen these things before. And yeah, that would be kind of dumb to like go up there with a CD player, hit play and be like, ah! You know? Maybe dumb, maybe awesome, depending on how awesome of a dancer you are. Who knows? But people completely misunderstood what I was doing. Now there's a whole controllerism scene. There's a whole, this is a thing, you know what I mean? Like, I got hired by, you know, a multi-platinum, multi-Grammy award-winning legend, you know, to do this. And there's people doing this in every facet of the music industry now, you know, country artists, electronic, hip-hop, everything. There's some sort of playback rig going on, and there's people backstage, you know, using controllers, or even on stage using controllers to kind of orchestrate the whole production. So this is a great time for me because, again, like I said, it's great to see this thing that I was just doing in my bedroom all alone actually have some traction and see that it's a growing movement. But it's still really early, which is awesome. And so I want to talk about those things today. But, as you know, I'm not going to just talk about technique. I'm going to talk about the stuff that runs in between the technique. Because it's that stuff that allows you to continue using the technique and continue to develop your own technique. I'm going to get into the inner workings of what it's like to be a performer, what it was like for me to travel from the studio to the stage, kind of share my journey, share what it showed me, and I'm going to try to share as much of that with you. But before I do that, I have to share this with you. Can we dim the lights? Is that possible? No? Do we have the technology? Bang. It's 2018, y'all. Turn that up.
Kick me. Kick me. What was that? An exhibition? We need emotional content. Try again. I said emotional content, not anger. Now try again, with me. That's it. How did it feel to you? Let me think. Don't think. Feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory. Do you understand? Never take your eyes off your opponent, even when you bow. That's it.
Yeah. Give it up for Bruce Lee. Anyone seen that movie? Bonus points to whoever knows what movie that is. No. See, you've seen it, but you don't know what it is. It's Enter the Dragon. One of his last films. Not his last, but one of his last. Definitely, I think one of the last ones that he was in it the whole way around, because I think the last one they had to put stand-ins because he had passed away. But I wanted to share that with you because that kind of points to what I'm going to be discussing today about performance. And I'll get into that in a little bit. By show of hands, how many people here are interested in performing their stuff live? Cool, cool. How many people already do? Okay. Now, again, to talk about performance, I have to talk about this thing. Has anyone heard about the flow? Okay. By show of hands, who's heard of the flow? Okay. Yeah, okay, good, good. So, what is the flow, right? The flow is described by this guy. His name's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, right? It's like this kind of psychological concept of the zone. Everyone's been in the zone before, right? Basically, the flow is when you are fully immersed in the activity that you're doing, kind of the concept of time just goes out the window. It could either like just pass really fast or time could slow down. The flow is when your sense of self is just completely gone, where the commentary in your head about what you're doing stops and you're just doing it. And it feels really good, it's exhilarating, and you're just doing it the best you've ever done it, right? You could be doing music, you could be playing a video game, it doesn't matter. I think everyone in this room has been in the flow state before, yes? Everyone has. Everyone has. You might not recognize it, but everyone has. I talk about the flow because the flow is essential to performing for me. And it's what really allows me to unlock the best performance in me. It's also really useful in the studio or in just creating or doing anything, period. And since everyone has been in the flow at some point, consequently, everyone knows what it's like to be out of the flow. You're doing something and you're killing it and you're just like, woo! And then something happens. Maybe you're like, man, I'm really, like it could be the video game. Oh, I'm about to get the high score. And then boom, you get out. And then you try to get back to that place. Does that sound familiar? Like you're in this amazing state and you feel invincible. And then as soon as you become conscious of it, you're gone. You're back in this mortal body and you're no longer this divine video game player or whatever it is, right? So what I want to discuss is what happens there. What happens when you're in the flow and then all of a sudden now you're in your head and out of the flow. And I want to discuss how to get into your body to get back into the flow, right? I'm going to discuss these things because the flow is super, super important in your learning too, in your development. There's studies that say the flow state allows you to cut the time in half that it would normally take to master something. Anybody hear the 10,000 hour rule? Like you practice or do something for 10,000 hours, that's how you master it? Well, theoretically in the flow state, they've done studies, that could be 5,000 hours or roundabout. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that because of the fact that it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be counting your hours. And I think it's much better to do 10,000 hours than 5,000 hours in the first place anyway. 20. Because again, the process is something that you don't want to miss out on, right? The process is your gold as an artist, right? The process to me is something I always say that is an artist's reward. While you're creating, the process is what is giving you some sort of immediate feedback. You don't sit and work at making music and only think about what other people are going to think about it. Hopefully not. You're sitting there and you're making it because first and foremost, you like what you're making, or you're trying to like what you're making, right? Trying to get to that place where you love what you do and you love everything that you create. The product of what your process is the stuff that the people get to enjoy. So you make an album or something, you put it out, you put something out on your SoundCloud. Yeah, that's the product. They get to enjoy it, but they don't get the best part of it. The best part of it was making it. You get that. So the flow sweetens that. And as much as it's hard to make a career in music and to have steady income as a musician or a creator, blah, 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 all these different things, there is something you can control, and that is having steady income of energetical payoff in your creation, right? So, I wanted to tell you about what the flow looks like to me. And you saw a little bit of it yesterday, but this is what the flow looks like to me. The flow looks ridiculous, okay? That is from many years ago, but at the same time, I still do. Yeah, it's hilarious. I gotta stop that, or else it's gonna be really distracting, I think. But basically, that's what I look like when I'm in the flow, right? I look ridiculous, but it doesn't matter, because when I'm in the flow, nothing else matters except just feeling that, right? But I didn't start out performing, right? I wasn't a person that said, you know, I'm going to go and I'm going to take this to the stage. I thought everything, because at that time, everything that the people I looked up to were doing was they were sitting in the studio making music. So I said, okay, well, that's what I want to do. And I gave you a little idea of this yesterday, but basically, I grew up in this really small town, Wilmersdorf in Pennsylvania. Super, super small. Do you know Wilmersdorf?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
That is crazy. Yeah, right. That's nuts. You know, anytime I hear of somebody that heard of this like 2-mile-long town, I'm like, wow, that's interesting. It might be 4. But either way, it's a small town. And I got into producing music. And long story short, I did that for years. You know, I'd come home from junior high and high school. I think I started when I was 13 or 14. And really, I made my first album when I was 15, 16. We went to Philadelphia, recorded it and everything like that. And I was making like 3 tracks a day. They were all horrible, by the way. They when I started, it's just garbage. But it eventually got better, and it didn't really matter because the whole time I was making music in the studio, I was really enjoying it. So I got to this flow state in the studio where I would just bang out tracks, at least 3 a day, having a job and going to school, you know, at least 3 a day. And that took me really far, doing that in the studio. It wasn't until I moved down to Orlando and I started this group, Soliloquists of Sound, that I started actually taking my studio tools, which at the time was a single MPC, on stage. And it was kind of just a means to an end. The idea that I had to, like, you know, kind of take what we were doing in the studio, which I was already kind of performing live with the MC that I work with, and take that to the stage, or just burn it to a CD and then bring it on stage and play it, didn't really appeal to me. So I just started taking the drum machine out to the stage. And we started this night where every week, my buddy Swamberger, he's part of my group, we would just sit there and improvise for like 6 hours. I'd have my MPC, I'd have sounds loaded up, we'd sit there I'd make tracks up on the spot. He'd rap on the spot and just freestyle to it. 6 hours. And sometimes people were there and sometimes people weren't. You know, it was our thing. It didn't really matter. Sometimes the room was packed and sometimes whatever was going on, there was like one guy in the back just like, yeah. It was a really small club. It was fun. But the thing that I found doing that, I was like, oh my goodness, this feels amazing compared to working in the studio. I didn't know what it was at that point, but it was way higher of a flow state. You know, there's different levels of flow states. And I later found out that, you know, in doing research on flow and things like that, I found out that the higher the flow state usually correlates with the risk that's involved. So like action sports guys, they get addicted to being in the flow, like doing action sports and like really things where there's, you know, even their life is at stake. And so they get to this like high that you can't get to when there's no risk. And I think that's true on the stage too. You know, in the studio, you can spend a month, literally, trying to find a snare for a track, you know? Does this resonate with anyone? Going through so many snares to find the one that you want, or just the sound that you want for whatever you're looking to make. So much time pining over just this little details, you know? And there's fun to that to an extent, but on stage, there is no thinking about it. When I hit this button, I better hit it on time or else I don't have another shot at that. The moment passes. You are forced to be in the moment because everything's happening in real time, right? You're doing things offline when you're in the studio, unless you're working with someone who's like, come on, we need to get this done. That can be fun too. But on stage, you get to this place. And I started getting to this place and it started unlocking, and again, unleashing this beast that I hadn't experienced before. But in that higher flow state, I found something else. I found this freedom that I never felt anywhere else. Studio, life, anything. That picture of me, like, you know, convulsing on stage is, I am somewhere else, right? And I am the most free I've ever felt. You know, I don't care how dumb I look or how crazy it looks or whatever. You know, looking back at it, it looks funny to me. But when I'm in it, I could rip a head off. You know what I mean? Like I could, even just talking about it, you know? I need some meat right now. I want to eat a whole turkey, you know, or something. I just like there's this ferociousness that comes out of me. And I used to, yeah, no. Just gotta calm down. Because just talking about performing, sometimes I'll twitch because my head is so used to being in that state that, and there's so much urgency there that when I start thinking about it, you know, I'm like doing these slow things to feed the twitch, but really, like I'd be talking to people, yeah, when I was, and I'd just go like that because my brain doesn't understand when I'm, you know, here with you versus this really dominant, free, amazing, utopian state that I find on stage. It's so influential that talking about it like almost teleports me there, right? My dad used to do this talk, you know, like I told you, martial artist. He used to do this talk. It's called Killer Instinct, right? And he would talk about that, like Bruce Lee, that emotional content, right? And he would do seminars where he would teach other martial artists to tap into this emotional content. And he would practice thinking, this is crazy, but he would practice thinking about people trying to kill his kids or his wife. Crazy, right? But he'd be talking about it, and he'd be like, so what I do is I just envision, and he'd start crying, like just like that. Like tears would start coming from his eyes, and his eyes would go like this, and he'd still talk. He'd be like, so what I do is I picture that this is happening, and like he's changed at that point. He talks about the emotional content, and he'll hit a heavy bag and be like, bah, as hard as he can. But then he'll turn on the emotional content, that killer instinct that he talks about, in the bag. And this guy's this big compared to me, you know? He's not the biggest guy, but he is a beast. And he would do this. And I think inadvertently I had that in my blood somewhere, that access to that emotional place. And that's where I found it, on stage. And because this was this unfettered, unabridged, unheld back, uninhibited version of DiViNCi, you know, it brought me places I never thought I could go, because this is a place beyond thinking. This is a place beyond thought. This is small, right? This is bigger. So I was tapping into a bigger antenna to pick up on frequencies that would take me further than where this could alone. So that started to manifest, not just on stage and in my creativity, where I started to be influenced back into the studio, but it also started to reflect in my career. We became really unique, and part of it was because I was up there with 3 MPCs. You know, I used to sit down to play, and imagine like that, you know, crazy loop that was playing, but while I'm sitting down. It looks really silly. My wife was like, you know what? She was part of the group too. Why don't you stand up? Because that looks ridiculous. And I thank her for that, because that started to engage my feet. Even as I'm talking, you'll see I'm pacing more now that I'm talking about performance, right? And that like really engaged the rest of my body even more to get more into performance. And we started touring, and that type of performance became our thing. It got us signed to the biggest independent label, which is Epitaph Records, and it took us all around the world. You know, I've been in front of thousands and thousands of people doing this thing. And it was all from this amazing flow state that we were able to achieve together on stage, as well as individually. And it led to a lot of success. 3-album deal with at the time, the biggest independent label in the States, traveling the world. But around the 2nd album that we put out, I started to realize how much I was disliking being in the studio. You know, once you have this feeling of this amazing state, being in the studio kind of pales in comparison. And also, I was dealing with the record label so much. I was a liaison between my group and the label, so I had to put on these other hats that involved me thinking and trying to consider what other people thought about the product we were putting out. Not just fans, but also the label. Like, dealing with all that stuff, it took me out of this creative space and got me more into this space. And I found myself, you know, years later, staring at a screen all day, thinking about these things, and it was maddening. It really depressed me. It brought me to a low place. So I was working on the 2nd album, and it just didn't feel good. It was around that time that, for some reason, my first language came out again. Does anybody remember from yesterday my first language? Martial arts. Thank you. That's what came out. And at that point, I was so immersed in music that I hadn't practiced the physical art of martial arts for 10 years at that point. This is something, again, that my dad taught me before I could even walk, and I learned my whole life. But for 10 years, I didn't have like a steady practice with it. But for some reason, at that point, when I was like feeling really low and things like that, martial arts started coming up again. And I don't know if it was because I was missing my dad, because he was stationed overseas during the war at that time, and or what, or I just needed to get out the house from in front of the computer screen. But 10 years later, I wanted to do martial arts again. And I started teaching it in my backyard because none of my friends knew how to do it. So I had to teach people. And immediately, I got tapped into this other place again. Now, what's interesting is at the same time, my dad started teaching some of the other soldiers over there. I got a letter from him, and at the same time, he started teaching over there, and I started teaching in Orlando. So yeah, there was some sort of connection happening there. You know, when I started teaching, I started picking up on things that I hadn't even, that hadn't really clicked when he was teaching me when I was younger. And I started making these rules. You know, when I had my classes and when I started teaching this stuff, I felt like really, really happy. Almost exactly the way I felt when I was performing on stage. I thought, this is interesting. What's the correlation between these two things? So I started looking at these rules that I made for my class, right? First rule is that you leave your head at the door, right? I don't know how many people would come in there and I would teach them a move or two and they'd be like, all right, okay. I'd be like, where are you looking? You know what I mean? Be here, like just move. The movement is simple. It's just this, just do that. But we're so trained to go into our head. Now, in a martial arts or self-defense situation, being in your head can get you killed. Like literally, it's like a matter of life and death, whether you're in your head. Creatively, whether you're in your head is a matter of life or death if your art dies or has a thriving life, you know? It's really important that you stay out of your head because you want this startle flinch reflex. Somebody grabs you and pulls you, you want that, right? Because what that's doing is it's reacting and it's reacting in an offensive way. This might be an eye gouge and might give you enough time to run away or that type of thing. Like, that's the thing you can't think about. You know, I had students that would come to me and be like, yeah, I was in this fight and I was trying to do this thing and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, trying to do something, you're dead. You know, like that's not gonna work. It has to come before thought. And the startle flinch reflex comes before thought. It's the thing that makes your hands go up before you go through the windshield of a car when you get in an accident. Don't try it, just take my word for it. But that's what happens. You gotta stay out of your head, right? Again, this idea of flow comes into mind. And I have to go back to my dad. This is my dad. And that's me. This is my childhood. See how little my dad is? But it didn't matter. That's a couple seconds before I blacked out. This is every day, okay? This is how we bonded, right? Or this is how he made me bond with him. Because I remember coming home from school with my backpack, and he'd be watching some martial arts tapes or something like that, and I could tell he was getting inspired. So I was his uke. His uke in martial arts is the guy who gets demonstrated on, right? So I was like, oh, he's watching that? I'd try to make a beeline past him really quick, and he'd be like, hey, let me see something. And I was like, those were the words that I always dreaded, like, let me see something. And then we'd go in the basement, and he'd be like, all right, I want you to knock me out. Like, I don't want to knock you out. Because then it's your turn. I know how this works. I've done this before. He's like, no, come on, seriously, do this. Grab here, do this, pull like that, and then hit right here, blah, 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 do this. Okay? I'm like, all right. Boom, and I do it. He's like, all right, cool. My turn. Right? And that was every day. If he didn't beat me up, because this is how we bonded, again. If he didn't beat me up, because I would laugh too. This is what, I'm not laughing here, because I can't. But my mom knew this too, and if she saw that we hadn't done anything yet, like fought that day, well then, after dinner, she'd be like, Dad, your son just called me whatever, you know? called me a name, and I'd be like, all right. And then he'd be like, what? And then he'd, run and get me, and then we'd fight. So that was fun, right? Interesting. And the funny thing was, I took this for granted. I went to school, and I started like beating up my friends because I thought that's like how you chummed around with people. And then I had like an intervention in high school. Like it took that long. Of all my friends, like one person was brave enough to stand up to me. And I was like, hey, what's up, man? Blah, blah, blah. And then like, he'd be like, that really hurts when you do that. And then like one by one, everyone around in the circle was like, yeah, it really does. And I was like, like, I'm sorry. I love you guys. This is love, no? Had to learn some things. But that was how I grew up. But he'd always talk about the holy grail to him in martial arts was this flow state, right? He'd talk about being in the flow because he saw masters that would come up smoking a cigarette and they were 76 years old. Someone would come up to him and they just go boom like that, and they'd like literally fly across the room. They wouldn't think about it. They would just boom, boom, And we would practice so much that we just try to get these startle flinch reflexes and these flow states embedded into us and this emotional content. So, having said that, I want to show you guys the first beat I ever made, the first beat I was ever taught. Can I have a volunteer? Sure. You had your hand up first. Come on. Yeah, come on. Have you ever studied martial arts before? Have you?
I did karate for 3 years, yeah.
3 years, karate, cool. Fun. I want you to knock me out. No, I'm just kidding. My turn. So, here, I'll give you the big ones. There you go. So it's fine. We're just going to fight a little. No, it's fine. I'm just kidding. So, I want to show you really quick. What happened? See, I took my eyes off my opponent. Right? So, you can come over. Yeah, here works. You guys can see us, right? Okay. So, these are, Arnis sticks, or Eskrima, or Kali. I'm Filipino. My dad's Filipino, so what I teach is Filipino martial arts, right? And I just want to show you a quick little drill. It's really nothing, okay? So I want you to grab here, not choke up on it just a little bit, maybe about, yeah, do that on both sides. You can come over here, okay? And you're just going to hold the sticks up like this, right? Other way. And this is the first beat. So this is the first strike of that beat. We're just going to keep a rhythm. All we're doing is a glorified version of patty cake with sticks here. Okay? So we hit the first one here, and then that comes through, and then we hit the second one here. Then this comes up. And then we hit the next one here. Comes through, follows through, there. And then we do it again. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Just 2 moves, repeated on each side, right? Keep it going. Whatever you do, I just want you to keep the beat. We're drumming right now. That's all we're doing. We call this Filipino drumming. See what happened there? Did you see that? He messed up and he went like this. Yeah. I want to tell you something about that. No, it's fine. Everyone does it. I'm so glad you did it because everyone always does it. That's like literally you looking up into your head for the answer. Your head's not where the answer is. You've already done this like 15 times, and then you mess up. And then you question, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong except questioning yourself. So, again, 1, 2, really slow. 1, 2. Don't forget to breathe. 2, 1, 2, 1. So we would do this, right? Just keep the beat. No matter what I do, no matter what I say, I just want you to keep the beat. So we would do this every day while we watched TV or while we talked. This is called single sinawali. It's a weaving pattern. It's called a flow drill, right? And we would just do this while we did whatever we were doing. And again, if you miss a beat, it's like performing. You just go to the next one. You can't go back. You gotta stay in the moment. So even when I start to do other things, you still got it going on, right? Right? You don't have to do what I do. Just consider what you're doing. And just 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Keep the beat. It doesn't matter if you miss. It really is just about going to the next hit, right? Boom, 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 boom. You want to speed it up? Okay. Come on, come on, come on. I don't hear that beat. I don't hear that beat. See? No, keep it going, keep it going. See, this is what I like to push through. I like to push through that place where it's like, We don't stop and reset, because there is no stopping and resetting, right? There's only the next beat. You're doing a fantastic job, by the way, because even when I do stuff like this, you're still getting it. Hear it? If you close your eyes, you wouldn't have known that we messed up because the sound kept going. Right? Right? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was fantastic. Well done. Well done. What's your name, man, again? Cab. Fantastic work. You know, it's so simple. The movements that we practice, both in music and in martial arts or whatever, it's really about this happens, then that happens. This happens, then that happens. And do I have the reflexes to do that? You only get the reflexes through flight time, through going through it multiple times. You know? The funny thing is, everyone does that, where they mess up. They're doing it. You see how he didn't even mess up in the beginning? You had it from the start because it is really simple. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's simple. Those things are simple. The part where you mess up is where you realize things are going well, and then you do mess up, and then you question it, right? This is what I found on stage. This is what I know in martial arts. There's the impulse to do something, and then the action to carry it out. And what you want in both arenas is you want the shortest distance between the two. My math people, what's the shortest distance between 2 points? Straight line. Straight line. You want, I want to do this, boom, action happens. And that's what happens when you're in the moment. That's what happens most of the time that he was doing that. But what happens in the studio for me sometimes is I question, right? Or when I was first learning that, I questioned it. I did the same thing. Now, when my dad was teaching, he just hit me in the head, and that gets you right back into the moment right away. But what happens is you got the impulse to make this hit or make this hit, right? And then you question, okay, I want to go do this. Do I have enough time to do it? Do I have the right sounds? I'm kind of hungry. I'm going to eat first. Yeah, I'll probably make some tea so I can get in the mood. All right, let's find a snare. Let's go here. Do I have what it takes? This isn't really sounding too good. And then you have the opposite of what a straight line is. You have all this deviation from impulse to action. That's when you don't trust yourself, right? Again, that's really important. But when you're just in the moment, you just right there. It's almost like you don't even have to think about it. The movement comes right out. So that's what started to happen on stage, and that's what I learned from martial arts. So that was my first beat. And I really appreciate you doing that, because, you know, to come up on stage and do martial arts with someone is it's a brave thing to do. Yeah, I tricked you anyway. So what I started to realize from teaching these classes is I was realizing what my dad was teaching me about the flow state, about flow. And I thought, man, a couple of months ago, when I wasn't teaching this, I was getting to this really low place. I was completely out of the flow. And that's when I started to really break down and try to find out the formula for what it was that kept me there. And again, I want to go back to when you guys are making music or working on something and you're stuck, what's typical advice that you're given to get back into it? Anyone? Yes? Don't think too hard about it. Yeah, creative block. Like what happens when you get a creative block? Like what's the typical solution? Run? Run? Take a break and come back to it? Get away from it? Find inspiration from others? Cool. Think outside the box? All these are right. And thinking outside the box, that's exactly what you're doing. What is the box? This. This is the box. So here's the technique I have that I learned from performing and that I know from martial arts that will get you through any creative block ever or any block ever in your life, okay? First, you have to train the reflex that whenever you've fallen out of the flow, it's because you're in your head. So you have to understand what the problem is in order to solve it. So, train that. You're feeling great, you're doing whatever you're doing, you're no longer feeling great doing whatever you're doing. Assume automatically, I'm in my head. It's like your whole energy was put into making that music or doing something, right? And then all of a sudden, you cut it off, and you created a dam right here. And then all that energy is flowing up here now instead, and now you're drowning in thought. Right? When you're frustrated, it's because you're obsessing about what you don't want. Right? Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm never going to finish this. Oh, it doesn't sound the way I want. This, that, the other thing. That's just focusing on what you don't want. Frustration. So all you got to do is open this back up and evenly distribute that thought and energy back out into your body. This is what I meant by getting out of your head and getting into your body. The thing that I realized about being in the flow state and performing and martial arts and how they kind of work together was the fact that when I was in the studio, I wasn't moving. But when I was out here doing this and doing this, I was moving. That was the common denominator between those two situations. It's that simple. You know, people think that this higher power, there's something that's bigger than them, comes through them and creates the best stuff, that you're a channel for that. But there's another way to think about that, is that there's something bigger than you, if you identify this as you, and that's this. As soon as you get into your body, you're getting into your bigger self. That's it. It's that simple. So this whole thing I call free your fingers, free your mind, right? Because that's kind of where I got it. Is like, I'd find myself trying to find something and playing something here, and I would be racking my brain, looking inside of my head, literally looking inside my head like, it's not there though. And I'd play, and then I'd be like, ah, yeah, I'm in my head. So then I'd start playing like this, right? I'd start playing like that. I go from this, where are we? Oh, there. Oh, yeah, that's right. I go from that, playing, there we go. I go from trying to figure things out to start playing like this. Now it's ugly, but I'd just start playing like a baby. I'd detach my thought that I knew what chord I was looking for and just start playing. Oh, there it is, right? Right? And I'd find it. As soon as I did that exercise of detaching my head from the rest of my body and putting my body in control, that's when I'd find what I'm playing. Now you notice when I perform, and I'm going to do a little performance after this, But when I perform, my fingers are going all over the place. They're free. And I just so happen to find where I want to go all the time. Now, I'm not saying that practice isn't valuable. I'm saying practice is valuable to get to this state more easily. So whenever you're in that creative block or any block, just remember, you're in your head. Get into your body. And that's why getting up and walking around, going for a run, getting out of the box, both physically and mentally, is helpful because you're actually doing that. Your greatest ideas always come where? In the shower, right? You're literally in the flow. You're feeling things flow all over your body at that point. This is study. Like, this is not something made up. This is something that's true, right? An even dispersion of focus throughout your whole body. And that's where I get with performing, okay? And I share all this in the performance talk because it's this that I learned from performing that I was able to take back to the studio and find the same flow state eventually that I had found on stage and that I found in martial arts. So now when I perform by myself in the studio, I look just as crazy when I get into it. And that's what's really awesome about performing. You had a question.
You said that you were just like messing around, like playing like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Did you already like know the chords at that point, or were you like just guessing and seeing if you would find a chord?
It's just like throwing my fingers out there and hoping that they hit the target. Because like I said yesterday, I don't have any classical training. I now like teach myself what these chords are. But like that thing I showed you, that Bravery Today song, those chords that band couldn't play, that's all stuff that I was sitting on the couch and just like, ooh, that sounds good. Had no idea what it was. Ooh, that sounds good too. And then go to the next. The part where it slows down is where I, ooh, that sounds good. Ah, you know what that needs? It needs this. And then all of a sudden you're on a search for an hour to get it, right? Because your mind likes to take over. It's like a record label. This artist has this really organic, awesome following, and they're doing this unique thing. Let's see if we can take what they're doing and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and make money off it and become successful, blah, blah, blah. Your mind does the same thing. Man, hey, body, you just did some really cool stuff. Move over. Let me try. Put me in the game, coach. Right? That's what it's doing constantly. And you got to say, no, sit down. Sit down. Because what I say, when you're in your head, you're going to get hit, you know? It's a matter of life and death, right? Don't be in your head. That's like, as soon as I started like getting in my head and people were saying, yo, he's the Jimi Hendrix of the MPC and this, that, the other thing, I started to believe it. And I said, well, I want to like go out there and live up to that. What's going to keep me doing that? And this software Ableton came out at the time, and I was like, wow, that seems really cool. But you know what? I don't want to start using that because then how am I going to transition from the Jimi Hendrix of the MPC to the Jimi Hendrix of Ableton? And it's stupid things to think about. Like, that doesn't matter. I wasn't thinking about that when I started. It's those things that get in the way. And when you get in your head, maybe Bruce Lee isn't there to hit you, to wake you up, but life will. Absolutely, every single time. And I have some stories about that too. But you get the point. You had another question over here? Somebody had their hand up over here? It's fine. So, really quick, I want to transition from talking about, you know, kind of the in-between stuff to actually talking about how you can start to take your stuff on stage. Now, this is really simple. I'm just going to give you a really simple technique. You know, a lot of people, they'll take Ableton Live or something like that, and they'll be like, okay, now I got to take all my tracks that I've been making and split them all up and then make stems of it and do this and do this. And you know what? They come up with all these grandiose ideas that they might have even learned from watching other people do it on YouTube or something like that, and they'll try to mimic that themselves. But it never really happens. Here's the quickest way and the most efficient and the best way to start performing. Perform. Do this. take 3 tracks that you would like to perform, and screw it, just that you could perform. Just 3 of your tracks, 3 of your pieces. If you don't have them, take somebody else's song, honestly. And if you're using, like, let's say you're using Ableton Live, for example. Just put them on a track, put them in the order that you want, and set up your phone and film yourself performing for the camera. Don't put any additional stuff in there. Just try to make the songs go from one to the next in a pleasing way. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take notes. As you're doing that, you think, man, this is really boring just standing here. I feel like I'm just hitting play on a CD player and dancing around. Okay, take notes. What would you like to be doing at that part? Well, it would be cool at this part, it kind of lulls. It would be great if I could play like some sort of solo on top of this while I'm doing this. Or if I could accentuate this with some sound effects or some drums. And then you take those notes and then you put that into your set. Oh, at this part, I wanted to do this. Grab an instrument, put it there, do a solo on that part, do it again, right? This is the most simple way to start performing. And what you do is you start by saying at the beginning of the day, tonight I have a show. This is why I learned this, because I started learning, like, I had all these big ideas, but I had shows coming up, so I had to just do the bare minimum of what it would take me to get on stage. And it's doing the bare minimum that gets you way further than if you're trying to make huge leaps and bounds. Allow yourself to take little steps, little steps, little steps, little steps. Because while you're trying to plot, all right, if I go like, all right, I got to run and then I'll jump and then, you know, while that's all happening, this could be happening. And this person that's taking those little steps is way further along than that guy plotting the jump. And it's more sustainable that way. You can do it for a really long time. So that's it. You take your stuff, you put it in whatever medium that you want to perform it, whether it's a drum machine, whether it's some sort of DAW, whether it's whatever, and you film yourself doing it. Then when you get to a point of like, okay, that felt good, that's when you go watch the video. And as a watcher, you say, you know what, this was kind of boring. And you don't think about what other people will think of when they look at you. Just think about what it feels like to you, right? Ah, this is kind of boring. It would be cool if this person was doing this at this time. Well, write that into your set. So by the time you even hit a stage, you have all this flight time under your belt, right? I did it by just performing a bunch and going on stage and going to that room every week and improvising, right? But you can do it just in your own room. Super, super helpful. Now, I want to perform some stuff for you. But before I do, what questions do you have for me regarding anything that we discussed or anything we didn't discuss?
Do you remember a specific time in your career, like at the beginning of your career performing, where you remember when you first got into that, like Unleashing the Beast, that specific time?
You know what's interesting about it? It actually didn't start on stage, now that I think about it. You asked me that. It started from performing it, right? You remember the picture I had up with the 4-track that we traded the car for and stuff like that? Well, with that, I would do all my arrangements live. So I would drop things out, create drops and build-ups and play stuff live, like drum fills and whatnot, while I was recording it to the tape. So instead of me, you know, pre-programming all the drops and things like that, I would have the MC or the singer that was there start doing the song that we were recording. Not record it, but record all the different things I was doing. And that's kind of what got me started with this kind of real-time experience. And that developed to the point that by the time I got down to Orlando, and I was in the studio with Swam, for example, like I'd be like really getting into it. And he'd be like, man, you just got to bring that. Just bring that on stage. And I was like, okay. It was really when I started to do that extra level happened. And it was at that night that we used to do, we called it vocalization. Because it was not just that, it evolved into an open mic too. So like a 6-hour jam with musicians and me as the drummer and whatever else I was doing. That evolved from just the two of us to like a whole group of musicians improvising together, and then like people getting on the mic and doing whatever over top of it for 6 hours. And it wasn't until we started doing that night though that like I actually like cried playing music. You know, like I started playing and we would get to this place, and that's when I got outside of myself and stopped thinking about what I was doing. Because we would just do it enough that we just got to this place where, seriously, we would be yelling, we'd both cry in the middle of an improvised song. You know, again, sometimes just us two. And that's when I realized the full weight of what it meant to be in that. And yeah, I don't remember a single instance so much as I remember multiple instances of it being kind of the same thing. It even got to a point where I remember being on tour and I was like at the Fillmore in San Francisco, and I was so hyped and the crowd was so hyped that I was like, ah, and I punched the speaker and I was bleeding and there was blood all over my drum machine and everything like that. On our live album, there's actually a part where I thought I dislocated my arm, but I just had like a really wicked muscle spasm in my arm. And I fell and cut my leg, and yeah. Lots of stuff happens when you flail your body around like you're not human.
So you have gone too far being in that state.
Is it too far? Or is it punk? I mean, I've gotten to places, I personally don't think it's too far, you know. Now, like in life, I've gotten too far where I like hit my friends or something, like break bones, like chumming around with my buddies. You know, like that's too far because other people are involved. But I'm back here by myself, so the most yes, I've broken gear before. Okay, so you guys know LP, Run the Jewels. He was going to sign me to Def Jux before he shut Def Jux down, and he invited me out to the Troubadour to open for him. And again, I was really, really hype. And I had my drum machine, and after my performance, well, my drum machine kept messing up on me. So I got really mad at it, and I picked it up and went, blah, and blah, 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 and went like that. That was too far because it involved the guy who fixed it, and he was like, man, don't do that. You know, like he actually, he worked at a Kai, and great guy. And he would fix all my gear all the time. And I remember I told him the story. He was like, hey, man, don't do that. Like, don't. And I was like, yeah, okay, I won't. And then there was this other time where I got really hyped from a crowd. And you see these Kaoss pads here? This is like the second version of this that I have, because the other one, I put my finger through. So this is like an XY pad. And I got really hyped. And distance is key, ergonomics is key, not just for the sake of your own health, but for your gear's health too. Because that particular time, I had like a table that was really high, or something like that. And this was like, this is like barely touching here. So like, I can easily put my hand down and touch the screen of it, right? Touch the glass of it, if you guys can see that, right? But I have it down here, kind of down here, right? Because I learned if I have it up here, I can exert too much force through it. I got really hyped. I was like, ah, bah! And I like put my finger through the glass of, which was a triumph though, because that was the same finger I injured playing a long time ago. And I used to have to like tape my finger up with electrical tape to play. And it was just a testament to how well I healed. That this time when I hit something hard with my finger, it broke and not it, right? So it's like Bruce Lee, pay attention to what it's pointing at, not the finger, right? So, yeah, I guess by some people's standards, not too far, but I wouldn't trade any of those moments for anything. Because those are the times that I found like, in the same way, there's been times where it's like, adrenaline's going so hard. I remember I was in a castle in Switzerland performing, and there was this huge, in Europe they have the best tables. They're actually stage risers, you know, and it was this huge, heavy thing. And I was playing, and then all of a sudden, this thing fell off of its riser. And I was playing like this, and it fell, and I remember my wife was on stage. She went, ah! Like she screamed really loud. I have footage of it somewhere. I gotta find that. And I was playing, and then the whole table started to fall forward off the riser, and everyone that was in front of it was like, ah! And I went, like that, and with my drum machines, like, pulled it back and was like, ah! And then another time I was playing, and I got really into it. There was this anti-war song that we were doing, and my dad was overseas, and I got really into that, you know, and I'd cry and just be like, ah! And I remember one time I had to shorten that song. That song was like a 9-minute song, like an 8-minute outro, something like that. And I had to condense it down. We had to have a lot of time. I condensed it down to 30 seconds. And at the end of the 30 seconds, like, I was on the table. I don't know how it happened, but I was like, blah, blah, like that. And when I hit the table or the drum machine, like, just my ankles went like that, and I was on a table this high, like, bah, bah, and I was like that. So, like, it's times like that where I was like, wow, that's weird. Thinking about it now, but in the moment, it was really cool. Like, I kind of just black out and stuff happens, which is great because I don't drink. I've never done any drugs. But this is like, why do I need it? Like, this is everything. So, yeah, I've gone too far, but I wouldn't. If I had to go too far all over again, I totally would. No question, right? Speaking of no questions, are there more? What other questions do you have for me? Okay, so, oh, yes.
What's that thing called that you put your finger through?
Oh, okay, you know what, this is a good question. I haven't really gone over my setup, right? Okay, so it's seen many iterations throughout the years, but right now, it's kind of in the transitionary phase. It used to be so much more stuff. Now I can fit it into 2 bags. It used to be like 4 bags. So from left to right here, I have my Ableton Push 2, right? And this is like my favorite controller ever made. It feels like it was made just for me. This was what really helped me to unlock not just playing drum solos and things like that, but also being more melodic in my stuff. But I used to find ways around doing that with MPCs, but this really brought it to another level. And then I have MIDI Fighter 64. And this is just 64 arcade buttons, and they all control a different pad. Then I have my Rolly blocks here, and I use these to control different aspects of my set. So like I can switch different songs through these and hit play and hit stop. And then I have like also pads here, and right now all it is 16 buttons of designer ad-libs. Because I thought that would be funny. I thought it was really funny if I had one that looped. Okay? So, a lot of the stuff that's in my set started as a joke. You know, I play with my face, I play with my feet while I'm performing. Those things were all jokes at first, you know? And now it's just part of my set. You know, you saw me throw the microphone in my mouth. That was just funny to me. But then it kind of got cool, and I had different effects that I could run. Humor, if something makes me laugh, I do it, right? So like when I'm in the studio and I do something and like even the timing of it is kind of comical to me, it doesn't even have to be funny, but it's comical to me, then I'm like, all right, automatically I keep it. Because it's just sign of it showing it moved me in some sort of way. And in this way, it wasn't like emotionally so much as it was humorously. But this was like me talking to my friend like when Panda came out. And he was like, and we'd always like joke about his ad-libs. And I was like, you know what I need? I need 16 pads and just his ad-libs. And then like, I was like, yeah. And then that night I had a show And at the show, I was actually doing it just so I could make him laugh because he was in the audience. You know what I mean? He was in the audience, and I started out my set like, boom, and then like, I need the resolution. I needed the resolution. But then he was laughing, and then mission accomplished. So, oh, cool. I didn't realize. Gear. So then I have my Kaoss Pad Kp3. Oops. And this is just an XY controller. And right now I use it for just like synths and things like that, for transitions between songs and extra things that I can play with. But I used to use it for effects to go, like to run everything through as well, because it's got delays and things like that. But I've since moved some of those things to my iPad. Then I have, I can't pick this up right now, but the Apollo Twin down here is my audio interface. And then the Kaoss Pad Kp3. Again, this is just an effects processor that also has sounds in it that you control with XY movements on, up and down movements on this pad. So that's that. And then, let's see, TalkBox. I'll get to TalkBox. Then I have this, my iPad running Lemur software. Lemur software allows me to create all these different things. I don't have it hooked up right now, but I originally created this so that I can control my Kaoss pads from this wirelessly, because my hardware started to break, and I use this to send MIDI messages to it instead of using the hardware on there. Then this is all the different sets that I can play. These select different scenes in Ableton Live. Sorry. Hey, how about this? All right. So, you know, I have like different songs that I can assign, and then I have a drop button. I can go back and forth between songs. This is like stutter edit, so I have different effects. When I hit different pads here, it'll cycle through different effects that I can run on my master. And then this is like crazy. I just recently built this. This is like something I'm trying out, because I used to have like a physical faders on stage, but now I'm trying to practice using like an iPad for my mixer. And I have effects and all different types of things there. So yeah, thank you for asking that, because I wanted to share what everything was up here. And then I got my TalkBox. Does anyone know what a TalkBox is? Yeah. It's really cool. Basically all it is it's a speaker horn, like the thing that in that speaker that delivers all the high information, not the woofer, but the other thing, is a speaker horn. And that's what's in here. Okay? There's feedback right now. And it's just housed in this pedal. And that's all it is. Right? Then you stick this tube in it. And now comes out that tube. And I now so I just stick that to the back of my mouth, and it works the same way that the body works. It's really awesome because it's so low tech of a solution. Basically, what you're doing is you have vocal cords creating a tone, and then you use the cavern of your mouth to shape that sound. And even though I'm not changing the pitch of my voice, everything sounds different and our words are articulated. But what if I were to do that with taking out my vocal cords? It would just sound like this. You'd still hear the consonants. Right? So that's exactly what I'm saying, or what I'm doing with this in my mouth. I'm not using my vocal cords. I'm letting this be my vocal cord, and I'm playing the notes that it plays here. So, so if I were to go like this, it would sound like this. But if I took,
now it sounds like this, and again I'm not using my vocal cords here. Again, if I were to take my finger off of this, it would sound like this.
Get it? But then, when you add vibrato and no changes into that, you got, oh yeah, baby, right? It's fun. Someone said T-Pain. This is very different from what T-Pain uses. He uses auto-tune. And there's nothing wrong with auto-tune. It's fine. Vocoders are different. Talk boxes I like talk boxes though, because I kind of grew up listening to those because my dad would play them. And, or play music like Zapp and Roger in the car. You know, like California Love, like that stuff. So that's really fun. And that's all that's happening. And it's like learning how to speak with an accent. It's not as easy as you think it would be, because there's a couple things you got to manage. You got to manage drool not coming down there and going into there, and lots of different things. Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, you're sticking a tube in your mouth, and it's a new experience. Oh. Okay, so what other questions? Okay. As always, if you guys have questions that you didn't get to ask, come up here at the end of the day. I have business cards for anyone that wants to keep in touch. Take one of these. But let's see. Let's see what we can do as far as a performance goes. You guys ready? Yeah. All right. I don't know what I'm going to do. My favorite. Oh, you want to dim the lights a little? Yeah. Okay, let's dim the lights a little. It says, somebody say no. Someone afraid of the dark? Oh, just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
none of your chin. How your physical remains found under the pen. If I'm coming up in a place, I'm coming to win. Wasn't in it for a minute, now I'm coming again. Read G's out, y'all can chat with y'all, please receive. But I'm gonna get back to y'all, please. Cause y'all really wanna get clapped with all these, my man. You can take y'all strap when y'all leave. You see the squad coming to place, they all freeze. Ice cold, with his mellow cool breeze. MCs never show a loyalty yet. No work, ain't never get a royalty check. I do work, no question, I'm on the set.
Thank you, guys.
All right, give it up for DiViNCi. Yeah. All right, Flo, you got it? Okay, so today we have a lot of stuff. We're orienting things today a little bit towards performance, and a couple things I'd like to maybe point out to you. We have performance, we have sound design. The session that goes right now in 22-112 is going to be about sound design for games. And now I know some of you are gamers. This is a pretty interesting, fascinating area that's just exploding. So for those of you who are interested in getting your sound design skills into the gaming world, this will be a really good session. This also, we're doing a session on Ableton Live and Push going on right now, and then there's also a session going to be on the Rolly Seaboard Rise, which is this amazing controller. So there's a few things going on right now. Two things I want to point out for this afternoon. Kind of one of our big sessions is the 4 o'clock session in 22-112 on performing and composing with Ableton Live. A lot of the stuff that you saw here that DiViNCi was doing, this session will kind of get under the hood on some of these things. We'll get into a little bit more of the specifics of the controllers and kind of slow things down a little bit so you can kind of assimilate some of this stuff. And then tonight at 7 o'clock, there will be a concert from our faculty. So 3 of our faculty members will be doing some really crazy stuff on stage for 1 hour, 7 to 8 o'clock tonight. There's also a couple things today. New ways to play with Dr. B is going to be just all sorts of off-the-hook things that you'll see about just using your body and using your brain waves and using all sorts of biodata sensors to kind of make music with. So on that cheerful note, go forth and have fun.